thank you very much. Hi to everyone. I'm Jose Carol. I'm the operating director of B Startup at Banco Sabadell. I'm going to do a short introduction of the panel that we have here today. The thing of the panel is we are trying to cover the whole space of an investment round, from the access to the investors up to the term sheet and shareholder agreement, and we are trying to do this in just 25 minutes. I think that we have some time, so we are going to be like rushing from one thing to the other, and I think that you all learn something about the panel. So from my left side, I have Sergio Perez, the director of Sabadell Venture Capital, Jordi Ferrer from Thinklar, Francesc López from Stay for Long, and Juan Antonio Castro from RCD. If you can please introduce yourself and the company you are representing in about 1 minute, please.
Okay, so I start. So good afternoon first. I'm Sergio Perez. I'm part of the Sabadell Venture Capital team. I work in the Venture Capital division of Bank Sabadell. So what we do is we try to identify startups with high potential in the seed and Series A stage. So we invest in capital in that stage. And also we have a venture debt. That it's a hybrid kind of financial the startups. It's a mix between equity and debt. Also, we have a B Startup, that it's our brand dedicated to the startups. So we try to provide them loans, credit cards, TPVs, things like that. And the different thing is that we try to speak the startup language. Because when you go inside a bank, sometimes you're afraid. So now you cannot do that because we try to speak the same language that entrepreneurs. And finally, in the bank, we have another area that it's InnoSales, in which we try to identify solutions for the bank. That means they are thinking in the bank of the future, so they are trying to identify solutions that they can help us to have revenues in the future.
Hi, this is Jordi Ferrer. I am the founder and CEO of Zinklar. Zinklar is a B2B SaaS platform that allows brands to run consumer market research in real time in more than 30 countries globally at a fraction of the cost of a conventional market research project. What we do is basically turn an industry, which is market research, which is a professional services industry, which means pretty slow, pretty expensive, and pretty occasional in terms of usage. We turn that into a SaaS model where we go very fast. We deliver results. Our platform delivers results very fast at a fraction of the cost of conventional providers, as I was saying earlier. And as a result, what we do is increase a lot the frequency of usage of market research and consumer data in the daily lives of brands across the countries. Our main clients are tier 1, tier 2 companies, marketing departments across every single vertical, B2C vertical, from FMCG to telecoms, to auto, healthcare, etc. We launched 3 years ago, more than 3.5 years ago, initially in Spain, and we have now offices in London and in South America too. And we have raised, in terms of, this is pretty relevant for the discussion we are going to be having, we have raised a bit more than 2 million euros on equity, and we have raised a bit more than 1 million in non-dilutive funding. And we are aiming to a Series A on the first half of 2020. And finally, just a very, very brief thing. I know that I had a minute, so I'm extending a bit longer. But my background is it's slightly different from a traditional, I would say, entrepreneur. So my background has been most of my career, all of my career in big multinationals on the research industry, in global roles, mainly in London. At some point, I decided that we had, and technology could change the rules of the game of the industry of market research, and I decided to jump to the other side. This is what we are doing currently. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Fran. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of the company Stay for Long. We are a hotel marketplace, but with the specialty that we are only focusing long stays bookings. What we do is that as much longer as you are going to stay there, we offer you better conditions. We started the company 4 years ago, in 2015. We are currently having deals with more than 250,000 hotels worldwide. The thing is that we aim to become a specific supply partner for hotels to bring them the best type of consumer that they wish to have, those who stay more than three days. We founded the company in 2015, but in sales we started 3 years ago. Whereas the first year we closed with a GMV of 5.8 million. Last year we closed with a GMV of 46 million. And this year we are closer around 100 million as GMV. We are active now in more than 18 countries. We have now a first step in Africa. And in terms of fundraising, we do trust that we have been really working capital efficient. Just we make a fundraising of 2.9 million during these 3 years. And to sum it up, these guys are investors in my company, so I'm sure we are going to have a really nice battleground now. Okay?
Hi, good afternoon all. I'm Juan Antonio Castro, working at RCD Lawyers, which is a law firm specialized in entrepreneurship and innovation. It's the first law firm that established this department 15 years ago already. We work mainly with investors, we work with the startup, but we work with the whole ecosystem, accelerator, incubators. So we have quite wide knowledge about the market, what they want, and we try to facilitate the deals. So thank you for having me today.
Okay, so thank you all for the presentation. I would like to start talking about how do you do to access the investor, how long does it take to talk to an investor, how long does it take to close a round, more or less if you can, explain to the audience more than me, how do you address the investors and how do you do it, please?
Many questions here. So I would say that how do we reach investors? So I think it changes. I mean, this is in terms of, I think it changes a lot in terms of depending obviously on the phase you are. So if you are in a seed phase, so you are trying to raise your first round, there are many decisions obviously that you have to take. One of them is whether you want to really have venture capital or you want to have, let's say, more friends, family, or business angels or whatever in a very early stages, whether you are ready to have, let's say, venture capital in your cap table. Or my recommendation, basically, if I were to choose, I would go with professional institutional investors as soon as possible, because let's say we have in our cap table Sabadell and 2 other venture capital, Inverready and Caixa. And I think they understand better the logics of what it takes and the logics of growth within a startup. So what you have to do is, first of all, understanding if you want to go along the lines of VCs, is understanding. My recommendation, basic one, is going to be understand the ecosystem, understanding who is doing what. There are plenty of investors, but you have to understand what is that you need, given the industry you want to operate in and given the stage in terms of development of your company, and start for that, having, let's say, a good knowledge, and then probably going local, because otherwise it's going to take you ages to get to a good result. Go local to local investors, local ecosystem, if you are in a market where it's rich enough.
Well, in my case, what I remember is like, the thing is that when you you start up your business, you don't have a deep knowledge about what is meaning of fundraising, because you want to be focusing workday. The thing is, it's true that the easiest way when you need money is make the 3F, friends, fools, and family. In our case, we did that 3 years ago, July 2016. And the thing is that one of the nice things of Madrid and Barcelona is that the ecosystem is quite big, and you have easy access to know exactly who is who. Once you exactly know the different steps of fundraising, to start from friends, fools, family, like pre-seed, seed, then you can know who are the main actors there. In our case, it's true that the majority of the biggest VCs that you can find in Madrid, in Barcelona, they have a really strong PR strategy, so it's quite easy to know who is who there. And what I did as far as I remember is create a CRM, like a list of all those investors that I think they can match with what I am doing and what I'm expecting to do. And what I do that it takes too much time is try to create a network stuff to speak with other startups that they can make you the email intro with those. But it takes too much time, but I think that the way I get access to the investors is through a networking work. So that's what I did.
I agree what they say, and I would like to recommend to do 3 things if you are looking for money. The first thing is to do the homeworks. I mean, try to, as they explain, identify what kind of investors are you going to address. So if they are in the seed, in the Series A, if they are more focused in fintech, in digital solutions, in which area, okay? The second thing is that prepare what you are going to show them. We are human, and usually we have plenty of business plans in our table. And the first impression is very, very important. So as we are people like you, it's important to try to identify with who you are going to speak and use LinkedIn. Because I'm sure that I know someone that you know. And if I receive a call from someone telling me, look this company because it's good in this, this, and this, it's not sure that I'm going to invest it, but at least I'm going to take more attention to that company. And who say any other thing, he's lying. I mean, we're human, and if you receive a call from a colleague who recommends something, you are going to spend more time. And the third thing is that, unfortunately, there are a lot of no. So and it's not that your project is not good, or maybe it's not, or you are going not to get your dream, but we have a lot of projects in our table, and we have to manage where we are going to invest. So no is something that you are going to receive a lot of times. But I don't mind. If you believe in your project, you think that it's a good project, keep knocking to our doors and try to identify the people who can invest in your company. Because all the venture capitals, all in the world, we have something that we call anti-portfolio. There are companies that we say no, and finally, there are unicorns. So think in that 3 things.
Just 2 questions. Well, first of all, we know well each other. I was just wondering how many investors deck per year you receive by email? In a,
roughly we receive roughly 1,000 companies, or maybe a bit more, but roughly 1,000 and 1,200. That's the deal flow.
Means that you maybe filter in few seconds, right? I mean, you just check the first deck sites and say this is gonna match or this is not gonna match.
I think that the first thing that you see, or that you if it can fit with your investment strategy and with the ticket size that you normally invested, and with and if yes, you continue. If not, you have to say no as quickly as you can.
Just because when I started and I didn't know about that, I remember that I started to like make a spam to send my investors decks to thousands of venture capital just when we started. And some guys, they will say me, okay, this is great, but we all invest in fintechs. And I said, yeah, but I'm going to be the next booking. Yeah, but I don't care about that, no? And the second thing is that even if it's true, what I suggest you is to be insisting, and maybe we can explain the case that we got here. This guy told us 3 times no, and the 4th one he said yes. So maybe sometimes it's based on be sure and use all the steps, be insisting, and sometimes you are so lucky now, but I remember first it was you, then it was him, it was you again, and the 4th one say, okay, we're gonna get it. So.
Thing is, by having this, in my experience as well, you have to take into account and be careful about how many doors you want to open, no? Because I think it's good to be select. You have to have enough options, but I think you need to be sure that you are not opening too many doors, because you can keep, there are things that are not going to work. And I think you have to identify as far, I mean, the VC will identify it, but as well, the entrepreneur has to identify whether there is going to be a possibility that this investor or this VC is going to be ending up, let's say, investing in the company. And you have to identify early that in the process. Otherwise, it's a waste of time, waste of, let's say, of time or expectations that you have. Then in terms of, it's like managing a portfolio of potential clients, no? When you are that you have to sell into, you have to segment them, understand them, and identify who are the ones that are more likely to buy your product. And to do that earlier, let's say, and it's a combination of inbound, if you want to sell, let's say, or outbound in terms of sending stuff to them, or inbound in terms of, let's say, creating some type of knowledge or awareness of your company in the ecosystem. But at the end, you have to manage, in my experience, a manageable set of potential investors. Otherwise, it's very time intensive, which for sure is going to be. But then you get crazy. You spend time on things that are not going to happen, and it's better to know it sooner than later.
And also, you asked how long does it take? It's important that you prepare everything, presentation, business plan, things like that. But because when you have the interest of one VC or potential investors, a good advice is that to have everything ready. Because if I say yes, and you send the business plan 3 weeks ago, or 3 weeks later, sorry, you say, okay, I don't remember exactly what it was that project. And also, that is one phase of the dealing. But the second is, when you receive the term sheet from someone, and in that case, I'm going to José Antonio to speak better than me, is that go to a lawyer, because sometimes, the first time, you don't understand nothing. And the first time you say, I'm not going to sign this agreement in my life.
But before arriving to the term sheet, when you are on the due diligence process and the VC is analyzing the company, what kind of things can you do to push a bit to the VC to receive that term sheet and not get too long, the period makes too long? What kind of advice or tips can you give to the audience to push on that?
Based on my experience, the first thing to be strong and to have the force to delay the whole process is be sure that you don't need cash. Because if you don't have cash, you have to run. And if you don't have cash, investors, they are going to smell blood, So my suggestion is, if you want to be strong to negotiate every single word from the term sheet of the shareholders' agreements, planify well your cash flow workflow, and be sure. I think that's exactly the base. Because what you heard when you start in that wall, investors, some of them, they impose you some conditions in the term sheet with the reason that this is a standard in the business. This position is a standard. And after, what I say is nothing is a standard. Everything is flexible. Okay? So the only way to win that fight is to have time, because he has the money, you don't have it. You have employees, you have to make payments, so the only way is try to be sure that you're going to have the time to deal with that.
Maybe? Sorry, just one very quick point on that. I mean, I definitely, I completely agree with that. And the only way, at least in my experience, to speed up the process of getting a term sheet is to have, let's say, one in your hand. More than one. That's the only way. So it's to have, let's say, to create a sense of urgency and to create a sense of scarcity, so that it's an only opportunity, and the investor is going to, let's say, is going to lose an opportunity because someone else is going to take it. If you don't have any, the first one is the most difficult one to have. Once you have one, it's easier because you create, let's say, that's in my experience, probably is the only way to speed up the process.
It's the same thing that Booking does. It's one room remaining at this price. No, it's like, wow, I'm going to miss it. So, what's the opinion of the? I
was just going to say, it's quite similar to Jordi. I think it's important when you are going to plan an investment round, first to plan in advance with time. We usually recommend for 3 to 6 months to plan, and you have to think that you will be working also with the round as an entrepreneur. You have to think what you need. You have to think if you just need capital, and you have to think if you need other kind of resources, other kind of partner who potential the networking and who can help your company to grow. It depends on the level, where is the company in the project itself. But in regards to the term sheet, of course, we recommend that. We recommend that try to open to different investors, and if one of them impose an exclusivity on the investment, try to have a short-term period, because if not, you're missing other opportunities. So, yeah.
You were going to say something before? No, no.
No, what you say, it's also important that to have someone in the table impartial, because, for example, when you are looking for the Series A or maybe a seed plus, usually you have different kind of investors. You have the family offices, you have maybe the business angels, and you have the VC. And all of us, with entrepreneurs, we try to have the best for the company. But when you are dealing for a deal, sometimes what you are looking for is different than what the business angels are looking for or the family's offices. And sometimes to have someone like the lawyer in the table, it's very important. Sometimes I listen, it's very expensive. It's the most cheap that you are going to have, because they are going to go, he's going to help you to go fast. He's going to understand the different things, because finally, he's in the middle. I mean, he wants to close the deal, but he understands you, he understands the entrepreneurs, he understands the business angels, and he used to do that. So he knows the entrepreneurs, he knows the VC, so it's only an advice that when you are in the second round, also think about that, because there are different interests in the same table.
The thing is that sometimes who is, in Series A, the lawyers are, which I was telling my experience that we didn't go with a lawyer as entrepreneurs in the first, we negotiate the term sheet and then the shareholders agreement, let's say, without expert advice. So I'm crossing fingers that we didn't sign anything very.
But you said that you regret on that.
Sorry?
You regret on that.
Yeah. Well, I will regret, I'm sure. No, but sometimes you don't know exactly who the lawyer represents, no? Because there are, let's say, 3 interests in the table, which should be aligned, but it's not going to be consistently aligned at everything. 1 is the entrepreneurs, 2 is the investors, and 3 is the company. And the lawyer can either play a role of trying to align everyone, or can, but in the terms, if he or she negotiates something, he will have to negotiate something on behalf of one of these 3. So sometimes it's a matter of what role.
Juan Antonio, normally, which is how do you manage this kind of situation? Which is your
Of course, I think it's important to understand what they want, what the kind of investor want. If it's a financial investor, if it's a corporate investor, we try to understand what the entrepreneur wants, if they want to grow, if they want to expand. So I think it's kind of sensibility in trying to be in the middle. I agree completely with him that, of course, we are not part of the project, but we try to facilitate the deal. And sometimes it's important to be advised from the beginning, before the term sheet, as you said, because once the term sheet is signed, executed, after it's maybe too late.
But the advice would be different to an investor than for the same clause. It's going to be different to the investor, to the entrepreneur. That by definition, because the interests are different, and therefore the type of negotiation that you have to undertake is different.
I disagree with you in something. I think that, at least in my experience, usually the lawyer it's true that sometimes he's a lawyer recommended by the investors, or he's a lawyer recommended, but it's his professional job. So usually they try to be impartial and to try to, sometimes you have the feeling that there are more representing the investors. And sometimes I have the feeling that they are representing more the entrepreneurs than us. So I think that,
actually, you feel that.
Yes, I think that usually if they are professional in this area and they are used to work with startups, venture capital, business angels, they are not going to do anything strange because they can do it once. No. So, no, I don't know. You are.
Agreed. Thank you. Yeah, I agree.
Trying to get a bit deeper on the term sheet, I would like if you can set really fast which are the most relevant clauses, or which are the most important things to look for on a term sheet, not to sign a thing that you regret some days or some months or some years later.
I think it's important that you count the experience, maybe that you regret, and after we make a summary.
Yeah, well, after my experience with my investors, what I say, I mean, what you always try to protect is don't lose the freedom to decide the daily operations or the daily or the quarterly operations of the company. So I think there is always towards the board of directors, how are we going to be managed? And the second is how the big things, who has the right to sell the company or not. So what we always have been trying is to, from one side, understand what is the deep interest of the investors. They want to try to control as much as they can the investment, and they used to ask you for liquidation preference or things like that. But in our side, what we always try is like, I'm the responsible to make this company going from 0 to 1,000. So give me the flexibility, give me the freedom to decide what is the budget, give me the freedom to decide how much money I'm going to spend in talent, how much I am going to spend in marketing, because the main reason why you invested in my company is because of me and my team. But it's always exactly the same. It depends on how much cash you are going to have, because this is the runway. And if you have a longer runway, you will have a lot of time to discuss with them and try to get a fair deal, no? But to sum up is like, try to lose, don't worry too much about the long term, and be sure that at the short term, because this is the real thing, how are you going to pay salaries the next month? How I'm going to make the marketing next month? Be sure that you have the support of the investors by the flexibility of these conditions to manage well the company without them.
No, I completely agree with Francesco in terms of that for me the most important, and there are so many areas, so many clauses, but what would be the most important one for me is to ensure that you have the freedom. I mean, once you have, let's say, a board, obviously the board and investors, so they are part of the company, and it's good. We can have a discussion whether it's good or not. For me, it's a very good thing to have professional, let's say, investors in your company and on your board, but there are many daily decisions that you have to take, and you have enough margin to have and to operate very efficiently and in an agile way in your day-to-day, even more than in day-to-day in strategic areas, etc. So it's important that in the term sheet for the most important part is to ensure that happens. So the entrepreneurs and the management has the freedom to operate, obviously always for the good of the company, but with enough margin of money over.
Which is something that used to happen. I mean, investors are more finance investors, and they don't know about mobility, they don't know about travel industry. So it doesn't have sense that someone that has a strong background in venture capital and investment, he's gonna force you to decide if you are gonna open a market, because they don't have the strong, deep knowledge about that. So in the majority of the cases, and it's the case that we are having, we have a huge flexibility to operate the company in the way that we're doing.
The thing as well is, sorry.
No, I would like to add something. The investment agreement and the shareholders agreement, it's a paper, okay? And I completely agree what they say. But something that I think that it's important, and sometimes we forget it, is that speak with other entrepreneurs that they have been invested by that VC. Because the paper is something that usually you put in a box or in your wardrobe. But you have to speak with people who has been invested by that VC or business angels to know what is their behavior in different situations. Because the paper is something, but what is your behavior when there are things or difficulties or different questions? It's very important.
I was going to say that's at the end of the day, we are people rather than, and then the way and the culture of the investor, something that you need to understand. As well, there is other thing, which is in your next round, the shareholders agreement is going to be completely open and reopened and changed. So there are, let's say, we are not signing shareholders agreement that are going to last forever. So are going to be, let's say, changing every round. So we have to, so you will either have the opportunity to change things if you have more, depending on how the company goes. But the new investor and the new leading investor is going to come with other, let's say, with his agenda, with her agenda, and you will have to discuss it together with the current shareholders on the new shareholders agreement. So.
And before finishing, Juan
Yes,
Antonio, you have
for sure. So
something
coming back to what is important for each part. So that depends a lot on the kind of in case of the investor, the kind of investor. If it's a VC, usually they try to protect the ecosystem, but the exit. So they try to invest to make an exit in the future. If it's a corporate investor, they try to invest to be in the project, and they try to, in the future, to acquire or to take more participation in the project. It depends. So at the end, and the entrepreneur, what they want is to have freedom, as they said. They want to have an incentive plan. They want to know exactly what kind of role they are going to have in the project after the investment, what kind of clauses for both parties. Typical what drag along for the investor, liquidation preference, we can count them. But it's important to define for the entrepreneur the role and the freedom as a management body in the company. It is important for the investor to define the reserve matters to take control of the project.
So time is over. Thank you very much, Sergio, Jordi, Francesc, and Juan Antonio for your time. Thank you all the audience to be here, and please give a big applause for the panel.